Hey Garth, how's it going?
Jason, always good to see you, buddy. Highlight of my week.
It's great to be back here, isn't it? Hey, I got a question for you, Garth. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so I just want you to think of one person, and this person is the most positive person you've ever met. Could be fictional, could be in real life, could be past, could be present. Who's the most positive person you've ever met?
Uh, Probably my wife.
All right, all right. And
Yeah.
what are the characteristics of her positivity? What
Okay.
makes
Okay.
you think
Hang on.
that?
Hang on. Time out. Time out. Time out. Listeners, you've gone through this entire season of cold opens. You need to know we do not plan these these questions. Some of the questions in the actual pod are planned, but these are not planned. So, most positive personalities. Yeah, probably my wife. And sorry, what was the second question?
What are the traits or characteristics that make you say that?
The traits or characteristics. Kind, almost to a fault. And I think that she excels at getting joy out of the simple things in life. She's not a highfalutin person. She doesn't need the brand names. She's like, we both really appreciate let's go for a dog walk together.
Mhm.
And she's constantly like, look at that. Look at how beautiful that is. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? I think helps in all of that. Her kindness makes her a positive person.
Okay, listeners. So in today's episode, we are talking about the
Whoa,
first
whoa,
three
whoa, whoa, whoa,
themes.
whoa, whoa,
Well,
whoa,
no.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Jason, who's your one person?
Well, how could I not
It's
say
your
my
wife
wife
now.
now? Uh, so it's Mother's Day on the coming weekend.
There
It's
you
going to drop
go.
right after Mother's Day. So it is my wife too, and she definitely is my support system, Garth. And I mean that. I would have said it with or without your comments. And so happy Mother's Days to both of our wives, and thank you for being those positive influences in our lives. And I think it's a perfect tie into today's podcast because today
It
we
is.
talk about three themes, and we turn the microphone back on each other to really explore the themes. Garth, do you want to tell our listeners what themes we're looking at today before we drop right into the pod?
We're looking at the first three of our podcast themes of the season. So we're looking at empathy and compassion. How do we lead with that? We're looking at leading with a positive attitude, and we're looking at building relationships as a leader. So lots of great stuff in here, listeners. Hope you enjoy.
You're going to love it.
With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's field to your day to day. Lassoing leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow.
Welcome back, folks, to Lassoing Leadership. I'm Jason Rogers, and I'm super excited to be back here and kicking off something special for the end of season 2. This is part 1 of a 3-part conversation between Garth and I. And of course, Garth is here, and we're going to be diving into these rich conversations with real takeaways and a few moments that even caught us off guard through the course of these 10 themes.
Yeah, hi everybody, welcome back. Thanks for listening and being a part of our growing leadership community too. We launched season 2 of our podcast around the idea of leadership themes that we drew from the hit series Ted Lasso, and those times when leaders have to be present, decisive, reflective, vulnerable. And we've had a phenomenal lineup of guests. We've dug into these 10 themes like empathy, positive attitude, building relationships, ethical decision making. The list goes on and on, Jason. It's been an incredible season.
Garth, I've been so excited to go through these. And as I think about what we learned through the Lasso series and how it ties to leadership, I'm becoming more and more convinced there's something here. There's a playbook to leadership that's drawn through the Lasso experience. And, we've been so thrilled to have our leaders or our listeners alongside us through the journey this whole time. And this time, we're going to turn the mics on ourselves. I'm kind of excited, Garth, to take a moment and interview you about one of these themes that stuck out to you. So here's the game, Garth. We're going to take the top 3 themes. Okay. We'll detail those in a second. I want you to choose one, and I'm going to turn the mic over and interview you as to why that is an important theme in your practice. What do you think?
And then I'm going to turn the mic over to you and just hope we don't pick the same ones.
You know what? If we do, I'm sure there'll be richness out of it one way or another, but I am totally excited to hear what you have to think. So let's quickly run through the 3 themes we're going to hit in this episode. And then let's get right into the interview. So the first theme that we can consider picking is empathy and compassion. You'll remember that near the top of the season, we met with Annalisa Bond, and she spoke about these topics. What an incredible conversation. I encourage people to go back to it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And we're just going through chronologically. So the second one is the positive attitude with my old university friend, Julie Cass. And we had an amazing conversation about leading with heart, about the hustle, like her experience of the hustle and what it took for her to back off and really start to have that positive attitude towards her own life and how that opened everything up for her. And what's the third one, Jason?
Now, Garth, back to Julie. I did not know Julie before that, but that was the most interesting, surprising, and enlightening conversation that we had throughout the season. I loved it, and I hope people will go back and give it a listen. I just recently re-listened to it myself. And the third one is building relationships with Pete Bombacci. Pete showed up with a Ted Lasso hat on, and here's a guy who just absolutely embodied building relationships and ultimately positivity as well. And he just came at it with so much good research and background. And what a rich conversation.
Super fun.
Okay, as per usual, Garth, you're up first. Okay, so let's have it. What's your choice of those three themes? What would you like to be interviewed on?
Oh, well, thank you, Jason. I'm going to go there. All three of them are amazing in so many ways, but I'm going to go with Pete Bombacci's building relationships.
How could you not? So, Garth, when we think about thought leadership in this space and we think about your own leadership, how do you make building relationships a focus in your day-to-day, your leadership? What are your leadership hacks in that way?
Yeah, I think building relationships a focus in my day-to-day, it's a part of who I am. I'm a relational person. And so part of it comes naturally. And for me, part of it, I see the value in building relationships in my own role. Like I can't do my role if I'm not constantly trying to build those relationships. And so I make it a focus because there's a natural tendency for me to do that. I like to share, I like to tell stories to people. I like finding connections between people. And this has been backed up. And I think this is important for our leaders and our listeners. If you don't have like a personality index or an inventory that you've done, we do core strengths at my school, but I've also done the Lumina. There's a whole bunch of different ones that I've done, and it keeps coming back, and it tells me that building relationships is an important part of who I am and how I get joy out of life. And so I recognize that in myself. So that's one way that I do it. Another way that I do it is I recognize the strategic importance in my role of building relationships. And I don't mean that in a cold, callous, transactional way. What I'm saying is, and these are other leadership topics, but if I'm going to lead with empathy, I got to know you. If I'm going to be an effective communicator, I got to know how to talk to you and how you like to listen. And so building relationships becomes a focus in that way.
So Garth, I have a follow-up question in that. You said, I like making connections and building connections with people. Now, the people who I know are the best connectors in the world, and I mean, Quinn Simpson, we had her on not long ago, and Annalise is really good at this as well. They know how to ask great questions that build those natural connections. I suspect you do too. So I want to just put you on the spot a bit and say, when you're thinking about building connections with people, what are your go-to questions? It could be one, could be two, could be three, but I suspect you got one or two in your back pocket. You're meeting a stranger, you're meeting somebody new, and you want to build quick connections. What do you go to in there?
How was your summer? No, I'm joking. It's classic. I love asking the question, what gets you out of bed in the morning? And going back to this idea of the two buttons that Ted Lasso never likes to press, the panic button and the snooze button. You can learn a lot from people, and you can expand on that. You're a morning person, you can back up like that, because it takes people away from, what do you do? Do you have a family? Where are you from? All those basic questions that will come out without a story. What gets you out of bed in the morning is a great way for people it's an invitation to tell your story a little bit. Could be exercise, could be your dog, right? Could be, a worry that you have. So I really love that question. What about you, Jay? Do you have a question to build connections?
Well, I think piling on that, that's one of my favorite interview questions. If I'm interviewing a new staff member, what gets you up in the morning? But also ask them what keeps you up at night. And I think that's the other side of that question that you stress and distress. And counter to something you just said is, I always like to ask a question, not where are you from, but where did you grow up? And I think that's a really, nice soft pivot to it, because it's not, I don't know, it draws out really interesting connections. You always know somebody from somewhere in the world, and you got some context, and you can get curious about that, particularly if you visited that space. So that's a big one for me. So
a similar, go
ahead.
I was going to say, both of those questions, they're soft questions, right? And they're questions that I think are invitations. And I really appreciate that, because what Pete was talking about, and one of the reasons why I picked this one, is it's the power of non-transactional moments as a leader with your people, right? So especially if you're in an organization, you're often talking business, you're often talking that transactional thing, that transactional connection. So when you have the opportunity to ask a non-transactional question and build a non-transactional connection, I think that it goes a long way. And I'll just go into this a little bit, because Pete Bombachi pulled out some great data and statistics that tell us that the single greatest contributor to happiness is social health. And social health isn't built off of business transactions. It's built off of these softer invitational moments that we have. And if you have good social health, you decrease anxiety, you increase empathy and compassion, you increase your immune system, you avoid depression. And so for me, I think those soft questions, those invitational questions, just build out a richer experience for you as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, in the organizational culture module that I teach in the summer, often we'll say stuff like, that moment when you stop and have a conversation that's not work related, that is personal, might be the most important moment that either of you share throughout the day, because you don't know what's going to come up. And sometimes I think we get so fixed on those transactional moments, but in fact, if we're going to build the human capital between each other, it's not about transactional. It's about transformational conversations, and I love that about Bombachi and the way he leaned in on that.
Yeah.
Garth, before I let you off the hook on this interview, I do have two questions for you. Let's do the first one first. If you were talking to a new leader, somebody who's dropping into leadership, what's the one thing you would give them advice on in this area of leadership? How would you, what would you tell them, put on a sticky note and have in their office to remember?
That's a great question. For all leaders, I think it's important for us to recognize that these non-transactional moments of connection, you have to be intentional. You have to look for them, seek them out, create those moments as well. Don't leave it to chance. Don't lead it to happenstance. Be intentional about it. And as Pete Bombachi said, and listeners, if you haven't, go back and listen to this one, because it's brilliant around the science of building relationships. He actually advocates for educating people on why you are going to do this. You are going to see me in the hallways, and you're going to see me walking up to you and asking you a question, because here's the significance of it and all those things I just listed. So it is a business skill. It is a business decision. These are the words of Pete Bombachi, to be intentional around making these moments happen. And that's my advice.
Cool. Last question was, Ted Lasso great in this area of leadership, or was he not great in this area of leadership?
I think that he is an expert. He's it's a master class. Everything from his little green figurines to the books that he gives. This is him trying to build connections in intentional and meaningful ways. 100%. He is great at it.
Okay. Well done, Garth. I can't top that. I feel like we should just wrap up the podcast right now. But against all my better judgment, I'm turning the mic over to you.
No. Yes. My turn here, my friend. My turn. So I don't know what you've chosen. So what is your number one out of these three that we're using in chronological order? What's number one out of these ones that we're focusing on today?
Really, really tough choice, and I love yours as well. But I do think it comes back to empathy and compassion for me, Garth. This is, and maybe it's just like you know, and I look back at my own leadership and I think about the times when I failed most greatly. And it was in the moment where I didn't lean into empathy and compassion. And I regret each of those. So I think
Mm.
it's just personal in that way. It's about personal, professional development. I haven't always been perfect in my leadership in this space. And I just need constant reminders to lean in like that.
All right. So you need constant reminders. How do you make this? Like, how does this show up for you in your work? How do you make this a focus of your leadership?
Well, Garth, I'm glad you're asking that. I mean, I always have a reminder around me about that idea that Hal Hannaford shared forever ago on our podcast, but that idea of 20% down. I need that constant
Yep.
reminder that, people are doing the best that they can and they're showing up in the best way they can. And there's always 20 to 25% of people dealing with something that's very large in their life that we might not ever know or see. So just having that constant reminder of 20% down. I think, the other thing that really struck me was a founder of Rundle, a guy named Dr. Rod Conklin, talked about seeing the world through other people's eyes. And I just so often challenge myself, whether it's through, theater, whether through a movie or whether through a conversation, is really stretching myself to see the world through somebody else's eyes and challenge myself to think about what it might be like to live their life. And so I think that's how I do it day in and day out, Garth. It's just constant reminders, constant focus, and we're always trying to develop as leaders. And I think you've got to have that space of weakness to truly look for improvement.
I've got my notes here from Annalisa. I love what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
Jason. She said, one of the things she says is life is more complex for our teachers and educators than ever before. Their own lives are more complicated, but also the role that they play in education is more complex than ever before. And I would extend off of that and say the role of a leader is more complex than ever before. Jason, how do you give empathy and compassion for yourself in your day-to-day?
Well, I think first of all, living with principles and values is really important because you know that if you're living with those principles and values, you can sleep at night because you are doing the best that you can under those guiding principles and values. And so I return to those, Garth. And they change over time, but the most recent version that I look at was written up in 2022. And so I give myself empathy and compassion by knowing that I'm doing my best and doing my very best to follow those principles and values. But it's hard, Garth. I think in leadership, this is one of the things that might be the hardest because we all hold ourselves to a very, very high standard. We think that, we have to be at the front of the parade and we've got to be strong and we've got to be, you know, we've got to be the best leader we can be for all the people around us. And sometimes we're just not. And so I think we have to have those loved ones in our life who are really understanding of where we're at and what we're going through. And they've got to be just rocks of support, whether that's a partner in life, whether that's, your spouse or your parent. I'm fortunate to have both my parents still in my life, or having good friends who are not inside your circle, who can empathize and support you. It's all about building those relationships, building those networks. So, Garth, I think that's what it comes back to. And I think, having good friends like Annalisa Bond, who you can give a call and is gonna, tell you that you're doing okay and show you that there is a path forward, I think is really important.
I love that. Leaning into others, because we are our biggest critics, as you said. It's hard for us to empathize with our own selves sometimes. So I appreciate that. But that's your practice, Jason. For an emerging leader, what advice can you give on having empathy, leading with empathy and compassion?
Well, yeah. So for starters, I would say get a coach or a counselor. I think that's
Yeah.
huge. None of us should be too proud to think that we can do this on our own. And, your organization is spending good money in supporting you in the support that you need. So get a coach, get a counselor, and always remember there's something you don't know. Bottom line, there's something you don't know, and it might have something to do with 20% down, right? If somebody is coming in and acting, behaving, responding in a way that, is incomprehensible, there's definitely something you don't know. And you need that reminder in those moments because you will be physiologically triggered when these things happen, and you've got to have that
Yeah.
touchstone to bring that physiological trigger back into place, because that's your job as a leader, is to be steady. You don't want to create any problems that you don't need, and you will create problems if you react in a way that isn't that kind of calm, measured approach.
Yeah. Quick side note. I'm actually doing some coaching with Quinn Simpson starting next week.
Oh, you're gonna have a lot of fun. Quinn is
I
unbelievable.
know.
Little plug, maybe that's her
Little
first
plug there,
sponsorship.
but
You should talk to her about getting a sponsorship. Well done. That's fun.
Yeah. Hey, listen, last question from me, same as you gave to me. When it comes to leading with empathy and compassion, is Ted Lasso a good leader?
Yeah, since I asked that question, I've been thinking about that. And I absolutely think so. And in particular, I think about his relationship with Nate. I think about, where he started with Nate, the towel boy who nobody ever asked him his name. And he could empathize with the fact that Nate was probably feeling invisible in that moment. And then he supports Nate in becoming an incredible leader. And Nate, again,
Diamond
isn't
Dog.
but he's not at his best. Nate is not at his best so many times through this series. And Ted does not let up, right? He just keeps on getting curious. He isn't judgmental. He is supportive. And I think we could transpose this across any number of characters in the show. You talk about Rebecca, you talk about Jamie, you talk about Beard. Well, not Beard as much as Roy, but Roy. I really do think that Ted does an extraordinary job of being empathetic. And I'm going to be super curious as we move through these, Garth. I wonder if Ted fails in any of these. I don't know the answer to that, but that'll be a super interesting exploration.
It's interesting to me that you brought up his relationship with Nate, because that's where I think he fails in empathy and compassion. He recognizes Nate elevates him, but then in some ways he ignores him. But something that he always brings to Nate and to to everyone is this positive attitude. And that's the third one. You and I didn't choose it, but I think it bears some discussion here. And so Julie Cass talked about being a heart-centered leader and being vulnerable. But one of the things that I loved about this was, and it's a practice, right? Having that positive attitude is a practice. And the language that we use, the self-talk that we use, can reframe the stories we're telling about ourselves and reprogram how we see things. And I have to tell you, I'm a really positive person, but I haven't always been. And since we spoke to Julie months ago, I've noticed my self-talk, right? And so to all of our emerging leaders and our listeners, notice your self-talk, because you're programming yourself. And it's that long-standing practice of, if you write down 3 things that you notice that are positive in the world, you can change the physiology of your brain. And that's something that Julie Cass, who's also a professional coach, if you're looking for one, there's another plug. That's something that Julie Cass emphasized in our discussion, So I do think all of these 3 come together in a really nice way, because all 3 of these are a practice. All 3 of these can be learned, and all 3 of these can really change who you are as a leader.
Now, just to wrap up this episode and piggyback off your top 3 comments a second ago, I know, Garth, you reached out to all of our guests from this year, and you asked them about the top 3 out of all 10, of course. What did they think? And I'm super curious. What did the survey say? What did our guests think?
Well, you know what? I'm gonna save that for a later one, because I'm just gonna focus on the first 3 that we've talked about, because we got a lot of great feedback. I think over 25 people talked about, decided to come in on this. And if you're listening to this, there's still time. Just check out my LinkedIn post on this, or just email us. But we did put the same question to our listeners. So thanks for all the responses. Thanks to Pete, Isabella, and Jeff for putting their thoughts and votes behind Annalisa. Thanks to Layla, Daniela, and Marco for putting their votes behind Julie. And thanks to Stephanie, Justin, and Denise for putting theirs behind Pete Bombachi. But really, thank you to Pete Bombachi, because he. Okay, here are 2 on Pete. Camera, and they may have influenced my decision here, but Cam from HTS wrote in saying, building relationships is what makes the world go round. I believe you. Thanks, Cam. And Pete Bombachi wrote in. Now, he couldn't vote for his own, but he said, my reason for voting for number 1 and for number 2 is that these are habits and actions that can lead to the outcomes that I see in the other selections. With that said, all of this really highlights that leaders, now more than ever, need to bring their full selves to the job, even if it's not always pretty.
Wow.
A Pete
Garth,
Bombachi truth bomb.
oh man, and I think there's so many of those throughout these conversations with these leaders. I look forward to revisiting all of the 10 guests that we've had, and I encourage our listeners to go back and listen to those podcasts. I think they're a great refresher on the first 3 leadership themes.
Yeah, so that's a wrap on for our first like review of season 2. So if you missed any episodes, now's the time to queue them up for next week, where we are tackling which next 3, Jason?
We're looking at empowerment and trust with Belle Liang and Tim Klein. We're looking at humility and vulnerability with Beth Pillsbury. And we're looking at resilience and perseverance with my little buddy Henry, who's going to be walking the stage in less than a couple weeks.
Oh, amazing, amazing.
And we've already teased the idea of a book club for the next season, season 3, and we are getting serious about it, Garth. I couldn't be more excited. If you have any great book ideas for this season and authors who we might be able to speak to, send them our way. And better yet, if you're in the business of leadership and have a recommendation that you want to support by being on the pod, reach to us directly. We would love to hear from you.
Or even better, Jason, if you've published a book on leadership, broadly speaking, we'd be interested in hearing about how you might be on the pod, like how might you add value to our listeners and to our leadership practices.
All right, folks. Don't forget to rate, review, and share the pod. We still will get Jason Sudeikis on here before we're done doing the pod. And we're grateful for every listen, every message.
Season 23.
And every leadership moment you walk alongside us. So why don't you take us out, Garth?
Yep. Until next time, keep reading. A hint to season 3, but keep leading and reading the Lasso way. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Garth.
Step up to the mic. It's time to play Lassoing leadership every day. From the pitch to the boardroom, lessons called to mind. Keep leading the Lasso way. You'll find we've got heart, we've got soul, and humor too. Exploring how Ted shows what leaders should do. With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's field to your day-to-day. Lassoing leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the Lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow.